Okay, I've logged into console.dialogflow.com with my Google account, and we'll have to first create the agent. So click on create agent, and let's create an agent with name restaurant search. We'll have to choose a language and default time zone. So the closest is, it seems Colombo is the closest. We will still use the DialogFlow version 1 of the API, so we'll leave it at that. Click create. Now the agent is created. So we have two default intents. One is the default fallback intent, and other one is the welcome intent. So the welcome intent deals with the phrases like hi there, and any initial phrases that users might type in. So we'll have to add some training phrases, some possible phrases that users might type in when they begin the chat, like hi, hey there, kind of phrases. So let's add them one by one. So there is nothing to be identified from these phrases. The DialogFlow agent can identify these phrases and then can respond with the responses that we configure here, the default responses. So here under the parameters part, we don't have anything, and we'll just click save because it already has got default responses. Now the next thing is to create our entities. Entities are the main thing that we have to identify from the user's dialog. So the most important entity is cuisine, because we are dealing with a restaurant search. So an entity can have reference values, multiple reference values, and each of them can have synonyms. So for example, I'm choosing Chinese as a cuisine type, and Chinese dishes can be called or named as different, called by different names. So I'm adding Chinese, Cantonese, Szechuan, or all those kind of things that you can think of. So when the user types in any of these, it will identify the cuisine as Chinese. So the next one, Mexican. I don't know if there are any synonyms that stands for Mexican cuisine. So vegetarian, you can reference vegetarian by vegetarian, veg, veggie, etc. Think of all the phrases that users can use when they want to mention vegetarian. So click on save. Our first entity is created now. So now let's add one more entity called location. So users might search for a restaurant in a particular location with a particular cuisine. So cuisine is added. Now the next thing, we will add location. So think of all the phrases that users can say when they want to mention a particular location, like town, downtown, city center, railway station. All these kinds of all these phrases can be used for mentioning about a particular location. So yeah, they can use nearby, nearest. So let's click on save. So our two entities are created now. Now let's go ahead and create our main intent. So we already have the default intents here. So let's now create the main intent as restaurant search. So give the intent name here. Now for the intent we need to add our training phrases so that the agent can identify when users type in, when the agent can identify it as a particular intent. Then extract entities and parameters from there, and then tell the agent how to respond to that dialogue. So let's first add training phrases. So think of all possible dialogues that users can say when they want to search for a restaurant. So you can see when I typed in one of them, any vegetarian restaurants nearby, it has already identified both the entities from that sentence, from that dialogue. That's because we have already added the entities, and it can directly search and find them out. So if it doesn't identify, you just manually select them and add them as a entity there. So the more number of training phrases you add, the more the accuracy will be for your bot to understand the user's dialogue. One thing I've noticed is if you have multiple entities and synonyms, it is better to add dialogues, training phrases, which has got those synonyms or entities in place, so that it is easier for the algorithm to identify them as belonging to a particular intent. So you can manually choose or select from the list. So it is identified Mexican as cuisine. Now let's look at the parameters and actions for this. So it has already identified two entities or two parameters, and you can see the value as $cuisine and $location. This contains the actual value used, typed in by the user. So you can use this variable in your dialogue responses, so it can put in the actual value put in by the user. You can add a default response, or you can add multiple default responses, so that it can use one of them at random, so your bot will not sound monotonous to the user. So the next thing to do is enable fulfillment for this intent, so that you want to have your own routine or an API to fulfill the dialogue or respond to that dialogue entered by the user. So enable webhook to fulfill the dialogue or the response. So when the user types in a dialogue, and if it belongs to this intent, it will identify all the entities from here and send the text and all other details to our Webhook API and get back the response from there. So now let's go back to the fulfillment. So you can see this cog rotating here. That means the agent is being trained by DialogFlow, and it's come back and said the agent training completed. So now let's integrate our Webhook API here. Go to fulfillment, Webhook, and enable Webhook for the agent. And then put in the URL for our Webhook API. So the API that we put in here, the URL that we put in here should be accessible over internet, because DialogFlow will send all the data to this URL, and it will expect a response back from here. So we can implement this webhook in any language that we want, and save the webhook integration. And our agent is now ready. So let's try it out now. So let's try with the basic welcome comments like hi. You can see that it has come, the response has come from the default welcome intent, and it will choose those responses at random. So you don't have to do anything over here, because the DialogFlow will manage all these welcome comments. So let's try a query, nearest Mexican restaurant. You can see that it has gone to the webhook with all the parameters, and the webhook has responded back with all the parameters that we entered. So it has identified all these entities and values from there. Now let's see the JSON that got exchanged between our webhook and DialogFlow. So you can see that the intent name that it has identified as restaurant search here, and under the fulfillment section you can see what text was sent to the webhook and what came back from the webhook API. So the speech and display text, you can see this has come back from the API that we wrote. So that's how the chatbot, the agent works. Now let's see the small talk. This is a by enabling the small talk functionality, you just need to click on the small talk functionality, and it has got configuration for almost all kinds of silly questions that a customer or a user might ask a chatbot about. It has got all default answers too, so you don't have to do anything out there. You can try it out here. If you ask something like how are you, it is going to respond back with a default message, and you can see that it has come from the Smalltalk agent, Smalltalk's .greeting. So you don't have to do any kind of coding for this. If you want to change the default responses, you can go ahead and change them. So this is made our life easier by configuring all these things at once, and you don't have to do any coding to get this done. Okay, so that's it for now. You can refer the blog for the technical details of the Webhook API and the other configuration part. Thank you.